When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about what if Joffrey had actually died a lot earlier on in the books than he ends up doing, in the situation where Sansa pushes Joffrey off of the battlements, basically, when he is showing her her father's head. Now, before we get into the video, if you would like to see more content like this, subscribe, like, comment for more content like this, and it helps the channel grow and reach more people that might like this content as well. So, getting into the video, we have this idea that Sansa pushes Joffrey, Joffrey falls to his death, he dies. Everybody's happier, right? Everything's good. Well, there's a couple bad things that go wrong in this. Sansa instantly is going to die. Cersei's going to kill him, or kill her for killing, Joffrey. Because of this, I think Robb would then kill Jaime, and I feel like Catelyn would back that up as well. Because the main reason they keep Jaime alive is for a way to maybe make peace, or to make sure that Sansa and Arya are treated well. But at this point, we don't know anything about, or they don't know anything about Arya. They don't really know what's even going on with Arya. At this point, she could be anywhere, and I think that would lead to Jaime being killed, especially being pressured by a lot of his bannermen even more because of the death of Sansa. So Jaime is also going to be dead at this point. How does that change some of the things going on? The Karstarks would not break faith with the Starks, in my opinion. This would get them their vengeance, and that'd be good for them. So the Karstarks, do not leave Robb's side. Number 2, we go back to King's Landing. Now, Tommen now becomes the new king, with Tyrion still coming hand to the king, and it would be a lot easier to control Tommen because he's Tommen. Right? As we're looking at that, I think a lot of the same notes still happen. I think Marjorie still becomes the queen. A lot of the same events still play out. With Jaime, though, you also have this idea that Catelyn doesn't actually betray Robb, and that relationship doesn't get kind of altered. Brienne would also stay with Cat. So a lot of those things would change a bit. Tyrion would also become the main heir of House Lannister, even though he kind of already was with kind of how the oaths work. But Jaime is now dead. Tyrion is the, only son left of Tywin. But in the long run, I actually don't think this changes a lot. Right, I think we have a few events that won't happen, right? So, the idea of Tyrion being basically assassinated on the Blackwater by Joffrey, telling the Kingsguard to kill him, wouldn't have happened. We also continue on with the main storyline in King's Landing, and the idea that Tywin would have been able to rule through Tommen a lot easier. And we also wouldn't have needed a purple wedding, because the only reason the Tyrells and Olenna, specifically goes along with this plan that Littlefinger, has as well, is that it makes it a lot easier for Marjorie to manipulate Tommen instead of having to try to do it with Joffrey. And Joffrey's just kind of a cruel dude, so we don't have this idea of Tyrion being framed. And Tyrion, as well, doesn't also have to marry Sansa. So the next question would be, who would Tyrion end up marrying? Because we saw that Tywin was trying to do a lot of marriage pacts, and what would he have tried to look to have done? I'm personally not sure. It could have been something like marrying Arianne Martell, even though I don't think Doran would have ever consented to doing that. I'm not sure what Tyrion's role would have been with Tywin at that point. Now, the real question to me is, does the Red Wedding still happen? Because the Red Wedding happens, one, because Roose believes that it's a losing cause with the Karstarks, leaving, as well as the Freys, and then a number of other mistakes happening with stuff in the north as well as that. Do I think that the Red Wedding still would have happened? I think so. I think there was enough still there, because Jaime's not a hostage, he's dead. I think the Red Wedding still happens. So I think the main story still, happens with the north and all that. But this theory is a lot harder as we go on, because Sansa, we don't know what her impact is going to be long-term within the story yet, with Littlefinger and all that. So what is Littlefinger's game going to be here? Littlefinger, his main game right now looks like it was to get Sansa, so he'd have a claim for, the Riverlands with the Tullys, as well as, him being the Lord of Harrenhal, as having control of that area. as well as the north. And then also he would have a claim to the Eyrie through Sansa as well. And he has control kind of Lysa and of little Sweet Robin at this point. So what would Littlefinger's plan have been? There's not a lot of routes he can go with. I think he might have just continued to stay loyal and keep gaining power, because there's not a lot of options for Littlefinger at this point. He could just take the Vale forces and look to help someone else. Let me know what you guys think Littlefinger would have done in this scenario where Sansa's really not a big factor and isn't someone that, is able to be in this role. Now, going back to King's Landing, we also have this issue of Tyrion would never have been on trial for the murder of Joffrey or his poisoning, so Tywin in this situation probably would never have died. Unless you believe the Oberyn Martell theory that Tywin was already being poisoned. I don't really like that theory that much. I think it takes away from Tyrion's character. So we have that idea that Tywin would never have died. Oberyn would never have died. The Mountain would never have died. A lot of characters in this situation live just because, based upon the facts that Joffrey is dead already by Sansa. So Tyrion, Tywin would continue to kind of rule in King's Landing with the Tyrells. Cersei's power would continue to be limited. Cersei would be backed into this corner where she definitely would have had to marry a Tyrell at this point, in my opinion. And that would have gone through. Again, I'm not sure who Tyrion would have been married off to. Let me know what you guys think in that situation. And I think the Lannister-Tyrell alliance would have been pretty strong at this point. I think they would have crushed a lot of the rebellions. I think Tywin himself probably would have looked to crush the rebellions going on within the Riverlands instead of Jaime, because Jaime, again, at this point would be dead. Brienne, again, would also probably be dead. She would have gone to the Red Wedding as well, probably with Catelyn, so she would be dead in this scenario. A lot kind of changes as you get further into this scenario. Oberyn being alive creates a lot of issues because the Dorne plot itself wouldn't have been a big issue. Oberyn's death kind of sparks it, and a lot of people wanting Dorne to go to war. And in this scenario, they really don't need that to happen yet. So Oberyn probably would have looked to somehow get revenge on the Mountain or Tywin at this point. I'm not sure how he would have looked to have done it. But again, I think this is all kind of pointless, because I think once Dany comes over, I think Dany would more or less win in the south. Now, I think it'd be a lot more difficult, because I think the kingdoms would be more or less united with Tywin still alive and his power. So I think this would have taken a lot longer. And the common theme that I continue to go to in every one of these what if videos that I do is that the kingdoms will not be united. With Dany fighting for the throne with Tywin and the Lannisters and Tyrell's power, it would have been a lot more difficult, in my opinion, for the kingdoms, especially in the south, to be united against this threat of the others. And more or less, let's also look at the things that would have been going on within the north that could have been changed by the possibility of Sansa dying this early. So with Sansa dying this early, we don't know where Arya is. A lot of people think she's dead. Rickon and Bran are suspected of being dead. Robb would be dead. Jon Snow, his whole plot would continue really the same. He would be dead by the end of this book, or by Dance with Dragons, basically, or whatever. So more or less, in the eyes of a lot of people, the Stark name would be dead, right? Because you'd have Arya Stark left, but it's not really Arya Stark. Rickon Stark, Wyan Mannerly knows that he's still alive. The options for the Starks are continuously getting a little bit limited more and more, and I don't think it still would have changed anything, because Sansa still really isn't that big of a power within the North, and she doesn't really have any type of power because of her marriage to Tyrion. A lot of the North would kind of just look at her and go, yeah, you're a Lannister at this point. Now, another interesting thing would be Tyrion would never have gone to Essos and stuff like that, right? So Tyrion would never have been there to advise Fagon to come to Westeros, would never go on to advise Dany. So the issue is, what is Fagon going to do? So Fagon probably would go to Daenerys and would go, okay, will you marry me? She's going to say no, because she's already married. What is Fagon going to do? Very interesting ideas where the whole idea of Tyrion not being, sentenced to death, not killing Tywin, creates a lot of interesting ideas where I'm not sure where they would go. I don't know where Fagon would go. I feel like he would have to just stay with Dany at this point and just be kind of an advisor or something along those lines. I don't know how John Connor would take this. I don't know how a lot of other characters within the story would take this. You know, Barristan looking at Fagon going, okay, this is the legitimate ruler. It'd be really interesting to look at. And yeah, that's kind of where we get to the end of this theory, where I think in the end, it still happens the same. I think the others would win this war because of how not unified the southern kingdoms would be, in my opinion, with how Tywin, I feel like, would have this force going against Dany's force, and I think they would be able to slug it out and prolong a war, you know, long enough to where the others would be able to come down and more or less probably wipe them both out. So that is my fan fiction for what if Sansa had pushed Joffrey and killed him earlier on in the show or the series than what actually happens at the Purple Wedding. Let me know what you guys think what would happen in this one. There's a lot of specific things you can point to that I didn't really touch on because there's so much and it's so broad with how many different things get impacted because of one simple change. So let me know your guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.